Tom Colohue YouTube channel, where today we are going to be talking in depth and at length about my personal favourite SummerSlam, that is SummerSlam 98. This is of course part of a whole load of videos we're bringing to you in the build to SummerSlam 2020. Joining me today to talk all things SummerSlam 98 is Sportskeeda and Digital Spies, Stephanie Chase. How are you today, Steph?
Tom, it is a hot summer night in London City.
Ah, damn it. If this goes out when it's cold, we got problems, but that is exactly how the pay-per-view starts. I have notes on that because that particular line has lived with me for the rest of my life.
Me too.
JF going crazy.
Me too, 100%. And the first thing I noticed was how different JR's voice was then.
In fact, I think I remember quoting this exact line to you while walking down a street in London after having a drink. And this is how we discovered this particular pay-per-view is the same one that we both watched first.
Yeah.
That is a crazy thing. Back in 1998, please do not try and guess how old we are. So I'm going to run through the card. I'm going to ask you a few questions about each match to see your reaction. Our first match is Val Venus versus D'Lo Brown. Val Venus at the time being a porn star and D'Lo Brown at the time having a really shaky chest. Probably D'Lo Brown's most famous run, even though it's not his most successful. Now, Jerry Lawler reacts to a lot of camera shots of women in the crowd while Val Venus warms up the crowd. He would later state that the porn star gimmick was holding him back from mainstream success. Before we get into the match, was it limiting or was it a perfect gimmick for the time? My first question, yes, it's about porn star Val Venus.
Well, firstly, do you know that the porn star gimmick was originally meant to be given to Edge?
I did not.
Yes, it was originally meant to be given to young Adam Copeland, who said no, and then years later did a live sex celebration on Raw. So coming full circle there.
Coming full circling.
But I did feel when I was watching it, I did have a thought of, if I was in the crowd, imagine being one of the women that they zoom on, because they literally just pick any lady in the crowd and pretend that she's excited by Val Venus. And I think I would have been watching it back, being utterly ashamed.
To be fair, at the time there was a lot of zooming in on the crowd. I know Triple H had a habit of asking the women to lift their tops up. Yeah. So there was lots of shots of in and around that in the hopes that apparently he could convince them by getting them on TV. That's an interesting way to get on TV, I've got to say.
Because us women are so desperate that like just the thought of getting on TV, we'll do absolutely anything. Absolutely anything.
All I'll say is people did.
One girl and they just used her over and over again.
See, my immediate thought as a journalist there is I should go back and research if that's true. But what I'm essentially saying to you there is I'm going to go back and look at everyone who flashed Triple H. So I'm not going to do that.
I was going to say, yeah, did the porn star gimmick hold him back? Absolutely. But was it perfect for the time? Absolutely.
D'Lo Brown is hailing from Helsinki, Finland, and he insisted on being introduced from different European cities every night, and of course still using his chest protector, which does play in later. Despite being one of the quieter and less successful Nation members, D'Lo always got strong heel heat. Why do you think that is?
Well, because he bobbed his head back and forth, which, as we know from the Churchill dog adverts, is annoying.
Is that all it takes?
That's all it takes.
Is that advice you'd give to people like Baron Corbin? Just keep bobbing your head and you'll be fine.
But D'Lo was he was a great character, and he might not have risen to the heights of other Attitude Era characters, but he was certainly one of the most memorable. And he did just appear recently at Talking Shop Mania. So
he did.
Yes, still getting those bookings.
Watching this having just turned 10 years old, I'm very glad to have had no idea what a money shot was at the time. Both men reached the height of their success with Intercontinental Championship runs, but fell out of favour as the WWF added ECW and then WCW talent. Of the two men, who had the higher ceiling for you, and was it higher than they were able to reach?
I mean, I would have given D'Lo the higher ceiling, but he never reached it. But I think that D'Lo, he had the unfortunate incident with Draws. Yeah. And I think that was hard for him to come back from personally. And I think that's kind of what really ended things for him in a way as well.
I remember they went for a few efforts of pushing him, but not really. Low Down, his last faction, involved Tiger Ali Singh and Mosh from the Headbangers.
Mm-hmm.
And it just never really got anywhere. They were just trying to get on the card, and that was literally their gimmick of trying to get on the card.
And I think with Venus, the only way Venus could have gone higher was to ditch the porn star gimmick. Yeah. And when he did, it turned out he was a very boring man. And
are we thinking like Coach Morley?
Yeah, but I think he just wasn't able to develop a character that could be interesting without this porn gimmick.
Yeah, essentially, if it didn't revolve around his penis in some way,
yeah,
he just couldn't get it going. The winner of the match was, of course, D'Lo Brown due to a disqualification. Val Venus did try and steal the chest protector and use it for the money shot, but got a bit too handsy with the referees. You've got to know where to keep your hands. It's very important. Edge is shown early on in the crowd, just sort of hanging out. Did the gimmick for Edge of hanging out in the crowd, watching what was going on, work out for you?
Well, it made him mysterious. I liked it. It gave him, like, the Crow vibes, as in not the look, the persona. So I, as a young goth, very much liked Edge, this mysterious guy hanging out in the crowd. So yes, it worked for me, but we'll see if he makes another appearance.
Certainly, based on what you were saying earlier, I can't imagine Edge as a porn star hanging out in the crowd. Don't think it would quite work the same. Michael Cole recapped Sunday Night Heat, where Steve Austin attacked a hearse thinking it contained The Undertaker and Kane.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't. It was Mankind wielding a sledgehammer, and this is a rarely known fact. Triple H did not actually invent the sledgehammer. Who knew? Our second match was the League of Human Oddities against Kai and Tai. The Oddities did come down to the ring to the sounds of Insane Clown Posse, but the whole entrance has now been removed from the network version. Given that the Insane Clown Posse were the hottest act on the planet then, as they still are now, of course, why didn't this match open the show to warm up the crowd with at least an hour-long concert instead?
Because they knew in like over 20 years' time they wouldn't have the rights to put it on their own network. I mean, the disappointment when I watched this with not having that entrance was just unbelievable. Like, I didn't get to see Golga dancing with his Cartman doll or anything.
Cartman doll.
Yeah.
I'm not even that big a fan of the Insane Clown Posse personally, but because of that was the first one I watched, it's such an infamous part of the entrance, seeing Luna dancing around and Kurgan trying to dance with that weird sideways shuffle that he always did, which looked very threatening, but not in a fun way.
It's amazing that Kurgan's like the breakout mainstream star. And like if Dwayne Johnson wasn't on this pay-per-view, Kurgan would be the most successful, really, because he's Hollywood now.
Fair, that's a good point.
Yeah, apparently he's in the Umbrella Academy Season 2, streaming now on Netflix.
I'm sorry, are you getting sponsored here? Are you slipping sponsorship into my YouTube video?
I'm sponsored by Kurgan personally, so I can spread the word that his life has gotten better since the days of 1998 SummerSlam.
To be fair, it wasn't that bad a day in 1998 because he did win the match. Kai and Tai are fresh off trying to chop off Val Venus' penis because everything revolves around Val Venus' penis at this show, and they didn't make a lot of pay-per-view appearances. Probably their most famous moment as a tag team was being repeatedly eliminated from the 2000 Royal Rumble at the same arena by the Acolytes. Do you remember Taka Michinoku being eliminated and then not coming back because of the landing?
Yes.
Hell of a landing. As a New Japan fan, you're much more familiar with Taka Michinoku than most WWE fans. Should he have been more successful in the WWE?
He should have been, but he was never going to be in the late 90s WWF. But I feel like all of Kai and Tai have done pretty well since this, because Taka still has a career. Funaki is a translator. I recently was on a call where he translated for Oscar. So that's a great role for him. And of course, the other member of Kaientai, Dick Togo.
Which I still read sometimes as Dick to go.
Dick to go.
That's like when you're ordering it to go, you know.
I think that might have been, I think the WWE creative team were probably hoping that's the way the name was to be pronounced. But yeah, Dick Togo here, it's quite incredible to see him here, considering he is now the somewhat manager henchman for Bullet Club leader and double champion Evil.
Yeah, he looks very different now, and I've got to say he looks great now.
I was gonna say, like, he looks great. His fashion has improved so much. He was wearing his cut-up jean shorts in '98. He wore that amazing white suit. Yeah, like his fashion has got better. I was just very happy to see a young Dick Togo at SummerSlam '98. But I was just actually talking to my mother before we started this recording, and I was reminding her of the time that me and my brother realized that Val Venus rhymed with Pal Penis, and we were trying over and over again one night to make her say Pal Penis. We were very young at this point and had never said the word penis out loud before, so we thought it was hilarious. And my mother refused to say it, no matter how many times we asked her. She was saying she didn't want to say the word penis because it was a rude word, and I said, well, it is an actual medical term, Mom. And then I told her, at least I didn't try and make you say Dick Togo.
This is a full-on comedy mismatch. Commentary on both sides has an extreme racial focus that absolutely would not fly in today's market, but the crowd ate up the giants, throwing the light heavyweights all over the place. Yeah, barely anyone in this match would feature at all, even 6 months later. I can't remember much beyond, for example, Royal Rumble 99 where Golga appeared. Who here would you be looking to pick out for a push?
Well, it's got to be Dick Togo, hasn't it?
Knowing what we know now.
Though, I must say, there is something... Dick Togo does stand out in a good way among Kaientai. On the oddity side, I think the only person you could have really tried with is Kurgan, who is just quite an interesting person in WWE history, because he's a big guy that they really did nothing substantial with at all. Absolutely nothing. So, I would have given a bigger push to Kurgan, or at least tried.
How to imagine that out of this one gem would arise? SmackDown's #1 announcer, Funaki. Funaki as an announcer has accrued more pay-per-view airtime than anyone else in this match combined.
Wow.
Next up, hair versus hair. Jeff Jarrett with Southern Justice, also known as the Godwins until about 2 weeks before this, versus X-Pac, who is also accompanied by a slightly bald Howard Finkel. Not entirely bald, it's weird hair. Now, before the match, Howard Finkel was attacked by the heels and had his head shaved, so he accompanied X-Pac to the ring, and in fact does the crotch chops as well, leaning back so violently I thought he was going to break in half. Was this peak Finkel for you, given his time with Jericho, his introduction to CM Punk years later, and all his years of announcing? Was this the moment?
My actual note for this is Vince should be ashamed of himself. Howard Finkel being used like this was terrible. It is so humiliating what they did to him, and then dragging him out wearing a DX t-shirt over his shirt as well, just to make him look even more silly, and then making him crotch chop. And I'm pretty sure X-Pac then says biatch at some point during this entrance when they get in the ring.
Yes, it's let me tell you something, biatch. Your ass is grass and we're gonna smoke it, which is pretty much every single promo that X-Pac made contained those two lines at some point.
Yeah. I really felt sorry for Howard Finkel. Though Dave Meltzer wrote, Howard Finkel looked like a cross between Vader's little brother and Captain Kangaroo. And then he added, I don't know how to nicely put this other than that when the cool group has Finkel as a member, or when Finkel starts saying suck it, then how cool can saying suck it truly be?
And yet people are still saying it, so it all worked out.
True.
On a slightly more positive note, Howard Finkel definitely lives in the memory after this one. Very natural entertainer, and my God, those crotch chops. X-Pac was very popular as he came out to the ring, and in fact, he was very popular as a face in general. Do you think the phrase X-Pac heat is fair on someone who always got a solid reaction, no matter what show you boot up?
I think he always did at this point in his career, but it did like taper off a couple of years later, because he really just played the same character over and over again. I'm not even sure how to describe that character other than annoying guy. Like that was really his main character trait. So yeah, I think at this point, it was fine to cheer X-Pac, but as the years went on, there was not much character development with X-Pac other than the time he got that Uncle Cracker thing, the X Factor one.
Yeah, I was about to come to that one. That seems to be when people are really focusing on the whole X-Pac heat concept. And we had X Factor, which featured Just Incredible and I want to say Albert. I could be wrong.
I think so, but that was a low point of X-Pac's career.
X-Pac's style has always been fast-paced with a lot of kicks and a lot of dives, similar to a lot of more modern wrestling. Meanwhile, Jarrett's always been slower, more methodical, and he always shouts "Galar Gay" when he puts a sleeper on someone. Does this clash of styles work for you? Oh, you weren't ready for that Galar Gay, were you?
No.
Go back and watch. If you haven't spotted it, go back and watch every single time.
One thing I did notice about Jarrett, when Jarrett came out in this match, the lighting was so intense that at the beginning I thought he had painted himself blue for a second. That's how intense the blue lighting was on Jeff Jarrett.
This is when he was still wearing the shirt that didn't have a shirt attached to it, isn't it? When he's just stripped going down across his chest for some reason.
Jarrett made some fashion choices. I enjoyed the match. I think the two of them worked really well together. Like, I think they are both really good workers. But I mean, all we wanted was to see someone get their head shaved. And did we see it? No.
No, in the end, no. We'll get to that. Hair versus hair is one of very few well-protected match stipulations, now considerably more protected than the Hell in a Cell. Is this a stipulation you'd like to see more
of? If it works, yes. For example, that was my pick for what I wanted Drew and Dolph's stipulation to be at Extreme Rules. Because I thought, one, they both have hair, and two, I mean, Dolph losing his hair at this point might not be a bad thing.
You don't think he'd get like a Samson and Delilah thing, he'd just lose all his power and be depressed for the rest of his life?
Okay, firstly, what power does Dolph Ziggler have at the minute? And secondly,
fair question.
Like, this could be the character reboot that he needed, in the way that Jeff Jarrett, who has similar hair to Dolph Ziggler, got it there. But yeah, hair versus hair matches are extremely rare. They're definitely not something that I would I mean, imagine like if WWE does a few of them that go well, they will have a hair versus hair pay-per-view annually, and absolutely, that would be good. But I always wonder how it comes about. Like, did Jeff Jarrett say to someone, "I'm thinking of cutting my hair," and therefore ended up in this match? Or do they force him to cut his hair in this match? Or do all wrestlers notify management when they're thinking of a haircut, just in case a hair versus hair match could be worked into their storyline? Tell me, Tom.
Well, to be fair, I can answer partly some of that. I can't answer about Jeff Jarrett. I don't know. But when you think to Vince McMahon,
Yeah.
When he had his hair shaved, he wanted to shave his hair. He was already thinking about it, so he went with it. Molly Holly volunteered.
Mm-hmm.
Southern Justice, ejected early, returned to the ring for the finish and accidentally handed X-Pac the necessary guitar to win the match because, as we know, you cannot win a match with Jeff Jarrett without a guitar being somehow involved. The New Age Outlaws follow this by rushing out with chairs to defend their boy, and suddenly the ring is full of people, with Droz and the Headbangers involved in the haircut, for some reason. Meanwhile, Jeff Jarrett swears loudly at Mike Chioda, which made the edit for the actual pay-per-view.
Mm-hmm.
Chioda pretends not to have seen the guitar. Everyone at home did as well. The match was short but heavy on Finkel, which I think we can all agree is a good thing.
Can we? I mean, yes, Finkel deserves all the airtime he can get, but like not in this way. I mean, rest in peace, Finkel. This is a low point. Sorry.
That is fair. Everyone has highs and lows. Doc Hendricks, which was a name for Michael Hayes for some reason at this point, hypes up the Lion's Den match, which is upcoming and takes place at a separate venue close to the arena. It is still in Madison Square Garden, but essentially it's a basement. Michael Cole attempts to interview The Rock, which, as I'm sure everyone knows, Michael Cole interviewing The Rock has wonderful compilations on YouTube, which definitely should not be watched in current climate of today. While still early, The Rock has at this point honed all of his catchphrases, even with nobody chanting along. 6 months previous, he was saying his usual catchphrases, but no one even knew what was going on. For a while, he was trying to give his opinion on things that didn't work. At which point in The Rock's career did you recognize what he could become?
Around this point, definitely just his feud with Triple H. That's what turned The Rock into a star in my eyes. This feud. Yeah.
On to, I think, what will be our favourite match. The oddest match on the card. I can see you just checked your notes to see which one we're talking about.
No,
Mark
I did
Mero
not.
and Jacqueline versus Sable and a mystery partner. Oddest match on the card, and not just because Sable was technically part of the oddities at the time. Mark Mero spent a lot of his WWE tenure getting happily beaten up by his wife. This then translated into a match when Jacqueline started to get involved. Talk me through your highlights of the Sable versus Jacqueline feud.
The absolute peak of this feud was their arm wrestling contest, which ended with Sable getting the table thrown exactly in her waist. That is the highlight of their feud, for sure. Before this match, which then became the highlight of their feud. But talking about their feud, so in rewatching this match, I had many thoughts on Sable. And my first thought was, is Sable actually an unlikely feminist icon? And I now will discuss that. Because I thought very much, so there's a lot of problems with the presentation of women in this period and in the next period and the next period and the next period and so on. So in a lot of ways, Sable was presented, she did the bikini contest, the evening gown matches and stuff like that. But thinking of her as a character and watching back this match, she, for a babyface, was allowed to be so angry and so just vicious the way she dealt with people, and we'll get into specific spots where this occurs, that it just made me think that perhaps Sable was actually given the best character that they've ever given a woman, because she was allowed to be a really angry babyface who was really going after a man because he wanted to try and diminish her. So yeah, I might write a thesis on this anyway.
You definitely should. You can get a PhD on Sable, unlikely feminist icon.
Absolutely.
Do you want to go through the spots that you've picked out?
Well, firstly, I do think that she wrestles in snow boots. Her boots really do not look like wrestling boots. They look like snow boots. The best part is her introducing Edge with her microphone that doesn't work. and saying, and now let me introduce you to my partner. And then you get Edge's music hitting. And it's just so unfortunate that her microphone didn't work, but it actually makes it better. Jerry Lawler on commentary, though, always a low point for any women's match. And he comes out with the great line, "My name's not Elmo, but you can tickle me anytime," which is unfortunately a line that has also stuck with me throughout my whole life. At one point when Edge is down, she screams, "Get up" at him. And considering that that's her partner, and that's how she treated him, it's just amazing in the best possible way that she's this babyface. And then there's another point where I think it's to Mero, she just screams, "Get the hell out of my way." Like, she has absolutely portrayed anger better than any wrestler in history. She portrays being angry better than her husband Brock Lesnar does.
What indicators were there that Edge was going to be Sable's partner?
Absolutely none.
Nothing. Literally nothing.
Absolutely none. Because, well, firstly, you would have thought maybe it would be one of the oddities, but obviously they had a match, but she had that built-in relationship, and frankly they all could have worked another match. It wouldn't have been that taxing on them. It was so odd because it was just such a one and done, which also makes it good as well that they didn't then try and like create this relationship between Sable and Edge. It literally seemed like she'd just gone round backstage and was like, "Hey, who's not on the card that I could use as my partner? This guy looks pretty good," and just went with him.
Where do you think this moment ranks in Edge's personal top 10 of career achievements?
On commentary, they say that this match is Edge's first big dance, which is true. Really, this is like his first big match, which left me with the thought that I'd rather be watching Edge have a rematch with Mark Mero now in 2020 than Randy Orton again. So... But I think this is kind of a forgotten period of Edge's career, really, because he did the Brood stuff. Everyone remembers the Brood because they had a cool entrance. He did everything with Christian that led him to all the TLC stuff that will live on forever. Then he had his like comedy, his Rated R Superstar run. So this is like the weird forgotten chapter of Edge's career where he was a loner who also happened to at least once, I guess, speak to Sable backstage.
That's essentially it, isn't it? His whole career up until the point where we had the Brood was standing alone apart from Sable.
Yeah, which makes it even stranger if they had considered giving him the Val Venus porn star gimmick, because they went from, we either want you to be an adult film star or a weird loner mute guy. I mean, that's two kind of, they're quite different, really.
They are quite different. You can't really have a porn star who refuses to talk to anyone apart from sex. Now that kind of works.
I do want to point out that this was so early in Edge's career that at one point on commentary, Jerry Lawler refers to him as The Edge, which is always something that annoys me because, of course, The Edge is in U2 and Edge is the wrestler. So Lawler made that mistake.
The match features a lot of time for Jacqueline on the back foot. She gets spanked in the entranceway, not sure why. She gets clotheslined by...
Because it's 1998. This
and
guy...
Edge likes spanking people, apparently.
This guy, Edge, he is such a loner, mute, something. He won't talk to anyone. He won't make friends. Yet, he will grab a woman and spank her on the bottom. So he's got that level of confidence, but not enough to make any friends in the back there.
Apart from Sable, obviously.
Apart from Sable, I guess.
Best friend at the time. She gets clotheslined by Mero and TKO'd by Sable. She also hits a frog splash, but on Mero, and headbutts in the, to quote JR, Dolada. Not her day. Mero, meanwhile, works harder than anyone has ever worked to make Sable and Edge look tremendous. The pairing was never again referenced, with Edge going into his feud and then partnership with Gangrel and Christian shortly afterwards. The match, even with 4 participants, lasted less than 10 minutes. I was going to ask what moments have stayed with you, but I think I've covered that now.
Yes. The crowd at that time were so into Sable that it did not matter who her partner was. It really didn't, because she was going to get at every pop in that match was for something she did. It's like, whoa, I can't believe Sable did a Hurricane Rana. Like, that's the point of the match. So they could have put out anyone in that position, and then giving it to Edge, it didn't elevate him in any way because he was completely lost, and it was never referenced again anyway. So I don't think this match did anything for Edge at all. And at the end of the match, Edge just fucks off anyway. Like, she's celebrating and he's just like, well, I'm gonna go back to lurking now. Nice to know you. That's my human interaction done for the year.
Yeah, his quota has been reached. He was nice to Sable for as long a time as it took for her to put her ex out of the picture.
But also, going back to the is Sable a feminist icon debate, in a way it's kind of good that this storyline is basically she picks Edge as her partner, he does the job of being her partner, and then he fucks off. They didn't have to make any kind of weird romance storyline, because obviously Sable came into the WWE with Mark Morrow, real life husband. That was a romance. Then they broke up. And for a while, she just kind of ended up as this like independent woman figure that was just against Morrow and Jacqueline. So I actually quite appreciate that they didn't turn this Edge thing into anything more than her just asking a guy backstage, will you be my partner? Him saying yes, or maybe just nodding because he didn't talk. And then that's it.
And that is still something they have a problem with now.
Yeah.
One of my favourite things in wrestling is knowing that Mark Morrow taught Sable the TKO, which is now used by her current husband, Brock Lesnar, as the F5. And it's actually complete coincidence. Or, of course, somebody could see a large sweaty man with a sword tattoo on his chest in her future. Backstage, Mankind is told that his tag partner Kane won't be showing up to defend the tag titles with him. He elects to forfeit despite goading from Michael Cole. It's a really good promo, eventually interrupted by Vince McMahon encouraging Mankind to go out there and get hurt for the entertainment of others. It's Mankind, so of course he agrees.
This is, to me, actually an iconic Mankind promo.
The silver platter.
Yeah, and also just the line, maybe I should just go out there and play with traffic. Like, that stayed with me my whole life. Interesting note here. So you can hear at the beginning of this promo, like, production background noise happening, which I thought was very odd. And then I'm adding that to Sable's mic not working and the upcoming Lion's Den, and I am thinking this is the inspiration for Raw Underground, because there's a lot of weird stuff going on this show. So did Shane McMahon watch SummerSlam 1998 a few weeks ago and get inspired?
Interesting.
Well,
we're going into that, because the next match on the card was Ken Shamrock versus Owen Hart in the Lion's Den, which the Lion's Den concept has been revisited in a way quite recently in a match between Riddle and Thatcher in NXT, and the design of the cage that they fought in. Additionally, possibly, yes, Raw Underground. Now, Dan Severn was supposed to be a major player in this feud, but in reality, he really wasn't a major factor other than throwing in the towel or not at the end when he was initially meant to or encouraged to. Shamrock versus Hart is a long feud that I remember very fondly. Both men were beautifully matched and were able to bring out the best in each other in a constantly escalating situation. Now, we enter the Lion's Den, which was a specialist structure in its own section of Madison Square Garden that was built similarly to the Octagon. Looking back, what did you make of having a match in a theatre separate from the rest of the event?
It came off so cool, and one thing that I picked up on was how excited the crowd in that theatre were, considering they were only getting one match.
Yeah.
They were more excited than crowds, well, we don't have crowds anymore, but pre-pandemic crowds were to watch a whole pay-per-view. Like, it just really exemplified how hot WWE was at the time, that you could sell tickets to just watch one match in a theatre next to where the actual event's going on, and people would be that excited.
I think it says a lot about Owen Hart and Ken Shamrock as well, to be fair.
Yeah.
The fact that they can draw that audience.
Yeah. Their feud was excellent. Like, It was just absolutely excellent. Like two incredible workers. Bit of cameo for Dan Severn. Had everything. And I really loved Owen Hart's And Then There Was One t-shirt.
Yeah.
It was beautiful. It was so cool.
His entrance music had quotes from his own promo where he turned his back on the fans as well. And those are things that really stay with you. I wasn't really familiar with his body of work before this because obviously, as I mentioned, this is the first pay-per-view I ever watched.
Yeah.
But you could tell he was a big deal. You could tell he was serious. Large part of that being, of course, that he received immense hate and nugget chants. Now, at the time, I had no idea what that meant, and I'm glad I didn't.
Damn. Gross.
Hart would move into a tag team with Jeff Jarrett shortly after this, and his feud with Shamrock would be his last major feud outside of its tag division. How do you think this one compares to some of Owen's other big feuds, such as those with Triple H or his brother Bret?
So, like you, this was my first introduction to Owen Hart because prior to 1998, I'd been a WCW fan and Owen was not part of WCW, so I didn't know anything about him. I loved the Shamrock feud, but then when I went back, I loved the Triple H feud as well. But I think his feud with Bret will always be his best feud because it's the only brother versus brother feud that has truly worked with legitimate brothers.
Absolutely, and I think the fact that he had the big win at WrestleMania 10 and then Bret won the championship later in the night, I mean, that could be looked at now as 50-50 booking, but I don't care. They have played it perfectly by doing that.
I never saw that as 50-50 booking. Like, I saw that as Owen being the little brother that no matter how good he does, in the end, Big Brother always has to just outshine him. It was such good booking and such a well-told story and feud, especially for two brothers. They've never, I mean, think of all the stuff they tried to do with the Hardy Boys. It just never worked. Owen and Bret got it.
A number of injuries would derail Shamrock's momentum after this, with the move to the Corporation coming next, as well as the infamous love triangle angle with Ryan Shamrock, Val Venus and Billy Gunn's arse. After this, there was a brief early feud with Jericho, but once again, another injury meant that was really it for Shamrock due to a mix of injuries and his desire to return to the UFC. Is Ken Shamrock someone you could have seen rising to the very top?
Yes. Maybe not to the very top because he didn't have the promo ability. He was always just angry, just very, very angry. But he could have risen to higher than he did. Absolutely. I blame a lot of that on like Vince just not understanding UFC or MMA at all. I'm not sure that he still does understand it, but certainly at that time, to bring in someone as legit as Ken Shamrock and then not use him properly seems like a really big mistake.
I always remember the whole concept of always going into the zone, always punching himself in the head. It was a bit of caricature.
Mm-hmm.
And I think like Severn, you could have just put him in a position where he fights and he wins.
Mm-hmm.
Because he would. The only other appearances for the Lion's Den was Shamrock versus Blackman, but with weapons, and one in which Shamrock would get hit by a guitar from Jeff Jarrett during his Union of People You Ought to Respect Some days, also known as Up Yours. When it comes to the Lion's Den, particularly the structure, what worked and what didn't?
The structure worked definitely as something interesting and something that looked serious. It looked like a serious venue for a fight. It was cool that it was kind of like a pit where everyone was looking down on. But I mean, obviously someone didn't think it worked because it's one of the few things they haven't overused.
Yeah.
So clearly Vince didn't like it, or maybe more likely Kevin Dunn found some weird problem shooting it and decided that it wouldn't be something they'd ever really utilize again.
Which is a real shame. I think having the cage match in NXT where we had the similar structure and the level above is the first time we've come close to the Lion's Den since 1999.
That's crazy.
We could do a lot more with this. Yeah, 1999 was the last time we used it.
And I think like really NXT is kind of like the perfect place for it. So it'd be cool to see them use that again, especially like now that you have Thatcher in NXT.
Yeah.
This pay-per-view is very influential for the modern era.
Absolutely. And I feel that's something they could revisit, especially for really dangerous people like Pat McAfee. The match is short but busy, with lots of reversals and clever use of the environment. Shamrock gets the win with the ankle lock and celebrates wildly on top of the day. A couple of short months later, he'll be cutting promos at a porn star and an arse. You can't say the man didn't have range. Steve Austin is asked by Michael Cole about The Undertaker declaring Kane will not be there. Austin puts over The Undertaker and threatens to cheap shot The Undertaker to death. Very short interview. Our next match is Mankind defending the Tag Team Championship solo against the New Age Outlaws. His partner Kane is apparently nowhere to be seen. Now, Mankind is at this point still transitioning into his more comedic character. He spent the last couple of months as Dude Love, who is also comedic, but this is Mankind's change towards a main event. He has, however, been main eventing pay-per-views against Steve Austin and is rapidly approaching his first World Championship. Does knowing that lessen the impact of how openly he is destroyed in this match?
No, because that was his character. Like, his character was this sad underdog that was looking for love in any way, which is evidenced by how he reacts to Vince in the promo backstage. So yeah, all this was the character work that would lead to Mankind becoming one of the most beloved baby faces of all time, really. Like, Mick Foley is one of the most beloved wrestlers ever.
Yeah, it was that moment at Survivor Series where he hasn't won the title and he just stares at Vince so confused.
Yeah.
The New Age Outlaws came down to the ring of a dumpster full of toys, in reference to the time that they supposedly went off script, locked Cactus Jack and Terry Funk in a dumpster, and pushed them off of the Monday Night Raw stage. Kevin Kelly was taken off of the announce team because of his reaction to that. The match is no holds barred and contains a dumpster, a sledgehammer, and a lot of weapons. Do you see this as a precursor to the WWF Hardcore title that will be introduced in the months to follow?
Yeah, absolutely, because I think they brought in the Hardcore title really because of Mankind and the whole idea of Mankind's character as well is that the guy can take a crazy beating and doesn't care. Like, they even reference him being thrown off the Hell in a Cell. So yeah, this was all leading to what would become the Hardcore title.
Using the weaponry available, Mankind would briefly rally and threaten to retain the Tag Team Championships. Was this the only way they could have taken the championship away from Kane when, at this point, he'd been in the company more than a year and had only lost matches to The Undertaker and Steve Austin?
It's funny that Undertaker, like the whole Undertaker Kane storyline and Paul Bearer, but then where like Mankind fits in as well.
Yeah.
It was all like very strange and convoluted, but I really felt sorry for Mankind at this point because his just whole thing was like he was the odd guy out. Like, there was something going on that he was not included in with Undertaker and Kane, and it was really sad. But what's odd in this match is, like, to me watching it, the Outlaws were such heels, but then X-Pac and Triple H are such baby faces in their match. And it was this odd kind of DX thing where I think it took more to make the Outlaws seem like baby faces than it did for the other members of DX when that transition happened.
I would say so. The Outlaws had a bit of history behind them of being heels and doing some quite dastardly things, to be fair. One of the most dastardly things is that in the intro to this match, they didn't do their standard intro of, "Oh, you didn't know." Thankfully, they did make up for it afterwards, but did you miss it as much as I did?
Yeah. The highlight of the entire Outlaws was basically the entrance.
Yeah.
Like, that was... also, I don't know if it was in this match that I noticed it. I feel like it might have been, but the way the Madison Square Garden layout is with the, like, very small entranceway and the little gate, I constantly saw men sweeping behind that gate.
Yes.
I thought that was really strange of why they would choose to do that at a point where the camera was on the entrance.
Particularly prominent in the main event when there was broken glass all over the floor.
Yeah.
The Outlaws, having hit some major finishes on Foley in order to stop him from kicking out, win the titles and put Mankind into the dumpster. As they go, Kane...
Oh, it's just sad. It's just truly sad.
After they go, Kane does appear, despite us being told several times he wouldn't be there. The Outlaws freeze in the ring, and Kane, armed with a sledgehammer, smashes it into what the audience assumes is Mankind's face. The Outlaws run past, and the match is over. Was this the best version of Kane?
Yes. The best version of Kane was wearing a mask and not speaking. Yeah, it was all downhill once he started talking. But this to me is like the iconic Kane, and absolutely worked with his storyline with the Undertaker. But what is interesting in 2020 is that Kane is now not only a normal man, but a mayor.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about this the other day because he did a controversial tweet about how I think it was to do with like people imposing fines for people not wearing masks, but then he related it to like criminals going free early, and a lot of people were very much against him for his views and his politics. And I personally could understand where he's coming from, because he is a man who was forced to wear a mask for many years while his arsonist brother walked free. So I can see why he'd be very angry at something like that.
This is the rock solid analysis that I'm sure you have come to expect from myself and Stephanie Chase here, who relates the current situation to 20 years of mask wearing and arson. The Undertaker did some other incredible things, which we will reference later on.
I will never forget the arson.
Time for probably the biggest nostalgia trip of the whole event for me. The Intercontinental Championship ladder match between The Rock and Triple H. This is a match that has lived in my memory forever since. From Mark Henry's sexual harassment lawsuit against China, to the hype package before the match, which was The Rock talking and Triple H as The Rock talking, and some weird stuff involving China getting attacked by The Rock. Talk us through the build to this one.
At this point, I loved Triple H so much.
Okay.
So much. And this whole DX and the Nation feud was one of the most exciting feuds that WWE has ever done. It was the I can't wait to see what happens next feud. Some of it is incredibly bad to look back on and problematic, but at the time, the feud was amazing. It's actually like, and we'll talk about it during the match, but it's incredible to think, like, to me personally, how much of a babyface Triple H was at this point, because the guy's had such a long career that babyface is not something you necessarily connect with Triple H.
No, not at all.
But yeah, as I said, we'll get to the match, but I think there was a certain reason why he was able to be such a great babyface at this period.
This was only the 5th ladder match in WWE history and the first one not to feature Shawn Michaels. How do you feel this holds up compared to those that came before it?
This, to me, is the best ladder match that they did up until this point. And watching it, listening to the commentary, it was incredible to think how new a ladder match was. Like, JR was explaining the rules. He was like pointing out just how much things hurt, and he's literally acting like he'd never seen a ladder match. And I guess a lot of the audience hadn't seen a ladder match, and it's just crazy to think like how special something could be if you don't overuse it, because now, like, ladder match, who cares? And just the way it was done here made it seem so worthwhile and made it seem like, yes, this is the point this feud has reached.
Absolutely. I do remember really enjoying the match. They used the ladder as a weapon in so many different ways. You had Triple H's leg getting attacked. Also, I think worth pointing out, I believe this is the only time I ever saw The Rock blade.
Yeah, I think so as well.
It's a nasty looking cut.
It is. I just wanted to point out the entrance was very good with Chris Warren from the DX band, except for the part that Triple H decided to lift him on his shoulders, which did not work. And to me, it just felt like I think Triple H has this thing where Triple H wishes that he was rock and roll like Jericho, and he just has these, like, Triple H has the most awkward rock and roll moments because he's a Motorhead fan. He's made that part of his character. He really, really wants you to know he is insecure about the fact that people might think he doesn't like Motorhead, so he really wants you to know. And there was the whole time that Motorhead played the game to him. Have you ever seen that video where he's singing? It's so awkward. And this here, I can imagine that this was totally unplanned, and he just got into the ring and was like, yeah, man, let's be rock and roll, and just lifted poor Chris Warren up, and it was so awkward.
It is true. This is very early in Triple H's live entrance career when it comes to the bands and stuff. And he ends the show by throwing the drum kit around. For a moment, the band just stare at him like, wait, what are you doing? And then join in, because what else can they do?
I mean, at that point, when a wrestler's already throwing your drum kit, it's just, you're gonna have to buy a new one anyway. You might as well finish the job. Another line that has stayed with me forever is after they finish playing, the King says, "That was like the Who." Yeah, he does. And when I was very young, I didn't get that, so I thought he meant who, as in who are they? And then when I finally learned who the band The Who were, my first reaction was remembering that line from Jerry Lawler. So that's just another one of those random lines that has stuck with me since 1998. It's bad.
It's amazing how much JR and Jerry Lawler lines are embedded in our memory.
Yeah.
While the match is high quality for the time at least, fitting of the Intercontinental Championship, it's ultimately decided by the hands of China and the balls of The Rock. Does this cheapen Triple H's victory at all?
No, and I think this is where I'll get into what made Triple H babyface. To me, and maybe this is as a young girl watching it, the appeal with Triple H was his relationship with China. To me, Triple H and China had this great kind of relationship where I felt that she really loved him and just wanted to help him. And the fact that she would love him made me like him. And if you look at how she's portrayed, because the way they were portrayed was like you didn't know what was going on between them. Like, is this just a business relationship, or are they dating, or whatever? But if you watch in this match, like how she's so stoic, but she can react to him and stuff happening to him in such a like subtly emotional way, where you feel like that connection between them, where you feel like she really cares about him. And even at the end, like she gets him the victory, but him as a character at this point was kind of an underdog character. It was like such a strange character because there was always this element of underdog about Triple H at this point, and how he just couldn't beat The Rock. And so you know that he needed that assist from China, but I think because of their relationship, it didn't take away from it. And then the way that she like reacts when he actually wins, like the way she takes him down from the ladder and stuff, there's just something so sweet about them. And I had a poster in my room that was like a centerfold poster from a Power Slam of Triple H and China together, and I'm pretty sure China was in this lime green outfit in the poster that I had up on my wall. And when they did actually storyline like break up, I remember taking that picture down from my wall and crying because I was that invested in their relationship. But there's something special that he had with China that is very rare, and that he needed her so much to get over. Like, she's not given enough credit for how much she made him.
Absolutely agree. We mentioned earlier about his feud with Owen Hart, and I remember China bending the bars of a cage that she'd been locked in. and things like that.
Amazing in that match. Or when she's handcuffed to Sergeant Slaughter.
That's exactly the next bit. Yeah.
She like puts the powder in his face. Like, she was such a great character at this time, and it's just her endorsement of him just made him a star. Because if you look back at who he was before this, it was, I mean, the Hunter Hearst Helmsley character was like verging on comedy.
Question I want to ask you, which is definitely something I would ask you more than anyone else.
Oh, yeah.
Where do Triple H and The Rock stand on the scale of greatest intercontinental champions of all time?
I mean, I feel that Jericho is the greatest intercontinental champion of all time, but he's also the greatest every other championship he's ever held of all time. Really? So we'll just remove him from the equation. The Rock, I mean, the intercontinental title at this point actually did mean something, and it was actually used properly.
Yeah.
It was so perfect for someone like The Rock, but it was also perfect for someone like Triple H. Like, these are two guys that are literally having a main event feud that's not in the main event, that's just being waited to be pushed up to that. So I'd say they're both two of the greatest intercontinental champions of all time, but I think this is the greatest intercontinental championship feud of all time.
Wow. Fair enough.
Like, this is my actual favorite moment in both their careers, even though they both went on to more heights. But this is my favorite match of theirs, and this is my favorite moment in their careers.
I'm actually exactly the same. Like, I know they both went on for feuds with Austin, but because of my age at the time, I never really got Austin. I never really got what I was supposed to get with Austin. Mm-hmm. And I feel that was age related, but Triple H I got, The Rock I got, and this match in particular, it's easily the most memorable one for me. Like, I enjoyed their Iron Man match at Judgment Day, but if I had to pick my favourite Triple H match, here it is. If I had to pick my favourite The Rock match, here it is. This is the one I'll always remember.
Me too. I mean, maybe, you know, there's so many different factors that could be in it. Like, maybe it was the age I was or whatever, or how I just felt about wrestling at the time. But the investment in their feud, and then the payoff in this match, and like the emotion around it, it's something that's very hard to recapture. And I can't think of another feud that either of them had that I felt the same way about it. But I think what also helped is, despite Triple H was a great babyface, but even as a kid watching, you knew that there was something special about The Rock, that you couldn't hate him in the way that you could hate Jeff Jarrett and just be like, he's a bad guy. But The Rock, you were watching being like, okay, I don't like what he's doing to Triple H, but he's good. He deserves to win as well. Like, yeah. The Rock deserved it. He deserved to be Intercontinental Champion, and there's kind of no heelish antics that he could do that could take away from how talented he was and how easy it was to see that even as a child.
It's funny looking back at, for example, the first time he did the People's Elbow, yeah, and seeing the reaction and the confusion in the crowd. And then seeing during this match when he hits it and he gets a very loud cheer, mm-hmm, and people chant his name. And it's not a Rocky sucks, it's genuinely a chant for Rocky. And he's the bad guy. And everything that he did, even just in that hype package, people still could not hate him.
I think The Rock is someone that, the way they book today, I wish they would just go back and look at the whole career of The Rock, with the early career of The Rock. Because he's such a great example of persistence and talent winning out. There's so many of his things that he did, like in his entrance music for this match, you hear him say, can you smell what The Rock is cooking? And he says it's so deadpan, and it's nothing like it is now when he says it. But he persisted with all these little things that he knew would eventually get him over, and he wasn't deterred from it. Like, he does a promo, and I just like rewatched this recently, on Capital Carnage. That was a UK show that no one was watching, that wasn't outside the UK, that he later recycles back in America, like weeks later. but it's like he's doing a test run, and he just did things like that just the faith he showed in himself and his own material, that if they let so many of these guys now have a bit of that license of The Rock, and at least let them just try a few more times before they give up, then I think we'd have a much better product.
I do completely agree with that. I think because of the amount of people that there currently is in the WWE, nobody gets enough of a chance, and they don't really listen to the wrestlers as much anymore.
Yeah.
Someone like The Rock, given the amount of time it took to get some of his catchphrases over, he would get 3 or 4 weeks. People would think, oh, it's not working, and pull him. Whereas his catchphrases didn't work for multiple months.
Yeah.
And then they did.
I think The Rock today would never have even got the chance to be The Rock, because if you go back to the whole him being introduced, Rocky Maivia, people not liking him, before he was then repackaged and allowed to be part of the nation, I think they would have just given up and said, this guy's mid-card, lower mid-card, nothing, like, sorry, we tried, without even giving him a proper shot. And then look what you would have lost. Like, who knows what guys they have today that do actually have the potential to be massive stars, but they just missed the boat with them because they didn't give them that chance.
While Triple H won the night, the rivalry would ultimately continue until the end of time. I have absolute confidence that when The Rock is 80 years old and setting a new record for benching whole football stadiums, Triple H will be there to be angry and jealous of him, as he should be. After the match, we went backstage in a network exclusive to The Rock, covered in blood, who still had a lot to say. Steph, can you walk us through this?
No, well, what was funny about this is The Rock is walking backstage in character in a totally set up segment where he goes to a back room to be checked on the doctor, and he shouts at the doctor. However, nobody told anyone else backstage this, because you can see Bruce Pritchard asking where the Undertaker is, and so no one can legit find the Undertaker, and you hear the words, he needs to be a gorilla. And for me, if that had aired on the show when I was a child that was going through an Undertaker obsession, but was particularly obsessed with anything that might be out of character about the Undertaker, I would have thought about that so intensely, about where he could be, what he was doing, like that little glimpse into the actual Undertaker. I just thought that was so funny that they decided to like film The Rock, him basically doing a backstage promo, and then have all this going on around it when they're looking for the Undertaker, who was clearly in the bathroom or something at the time.
We are moving on to the main event for the WWF Championship, held by Stone Cold Steve Austin. At the time, he is challenged by The Undertaker. Now, at this point in time, the WWE was struggling for top-level talent. A lot of people had very recently left, including potential main eventers, such as Shawn Michaels, such as Diesel, and the like, quite recently had moved on. Were Austin and Undertaker really the only top names at this point?
Yes, I mean, they were the only two established enough. You know, The Undertaker is the most established guy in the company. Austin's the hottest guy in the company. As The Rock and Triple H, it wasn't time yet. So I do like that they kind of kept them in the Intercontinental picture. But it is funny when you look back at these Attitude Eras that the card is one of the least, it's the least kind of top heavy roster that you've got, because it really is just Austin and Undertaker at the top for a lot of it. But what helps is all the other characters were so well developed that you can kind of ignore that and just accept that, there's two guys at the top, because really, like, how many do you want? You know, now we have the problem of, whatever we have now is a very big problem, but now we have the problem of, like, who is actually the main eventer and how many old guys have we got to bring back. But here it was just like, two top guys, and then these other guys below that are going to be elevated.
Yeah, it's one of those things. We talked about The Rock earlier. I don't think if, for example, Shawn Michaels had been available, or anyone else who'd recently left the company, I'm not sure The Rock would have won the Deadly Game tournament not long afterwards. It was
I
only
think-
3 months after all between.
No, I was just going to say, I think if Shawn Michaels was around, we probably wouldn't have had the Attitude Era boom, and that's coming from someone who Shawn Michaels is like their favorite or second favorite of all time, but that guy was not going to let what needed to happen.
Kane and Vince McMahon were major players in the build-up to the match, but neither were actually involved at all beyond a very brief appearance from Kane. Even a year before this match, The Undertaker was very different, darker, more casket match orientated. At this time, he was leaning more towards appearing in his street clothes, wearing bandanas, and spending more time with a microphone. This was really embodied for me, at least, by his different, more fast-paced and guitar-heavy theme. As an Undertaker fan in the extreme, what did you make of this version of The Undertaker?
Firstly, this is The Undertaker's best entrance music, 100%. It's like you cannot compare Kid Rock or Limp Bizkit to how cool this entrance music was. This is when I first started watching WWE after being a WCW fan. So right now, I am completely in love and obsessed with The Undertaker. That's where I am in my life.
Okay, but we're talking about back then.
Back then, yeah. So this is my favorite Undertaker look as well. Like, this is my favorite ring gear for him. This is my favorite ring cape, as I would call it. And this is my favorite hair for The Undertaker. This is just the complete Undertaker package for me. This is the Undertaker I want to remember. This is him at his peak goth-tastic level of excellence. And at this point in my life, I would probably have been planning our wedding.
What's a wedding with The Undertaker look like?
Weirdly enough, the wedding I had planned between me and The Undertaker was
You had
very
what everyone
similar.
planned.
Yeah, the wedding I had planned for me and The Undertaker was very similar to the one he ended up doing with Stephanie McMahon, except I would have been a willing participant.
Would you still have been tied down?
Hopefully. Okay, can you imagine?
With Paul
though-
Bearer watching.
Can you imagine being a young, very young, of course, this is 1998, so I was an extremely young girl, in love with The Undertaker, and then they end up doing a storyline where he tries to marry a girl with the same name as you? Imagine how exciting that was for me. What a massive, wonderful coincidence.
When he's in the limo and he looks back and he says, "Where to, Stephanie?" Is that
I
something that
played
just
that.
kept playing in your head for the rest of your life?
Over and over again. I was like, take me to Las Vegas, Undertaker. And you have to remember, at this time, I wasn't fully clued into everything. So I was, factoring in that, would our wedding have to contain his brother Kane? Would our wedding happen on a time where him and Kane were on good terms or bad terms? What were we going to do? There was so much to factor in to my wedding with The Undertaker that sadly never took place. And I'd like to add that I would have, if me and The Undertaker had got married at this period, we would have absolutely got divorced when he became the American Badass. That's a deal breaker.
The match is not typical of Iron Man. Austin, a brawler at the time, goes technical early on and doesn't go with his usual habit of fighting through the crowd to open a pay-per-view until a bit later on in the match. The Undertaker, meanwhile, shows significant vulnerability, which is more fitting with the character he was at the time, but not particularly fitting with what came before. Austin also gets a knock on the head early on, and that seems to rattle him quite a bit.
Are you talking about when he was walking out and whacked by a cardboard cutout of himself?
No, but please tell me more.
When he's making his entrance, it's so funny because it's like such a short ramp, as we've said. So like the glass smashes, he's walking out. People are putting their hands all over this man. And then someone has a big cardboard cutout of Austin. It flops over, hits Austin, and Austin turns around to like whack a cardboard cutout of himself as he makes his way to the ring. That's how you know you're over.
Absolutely, when you're getting attacked by cardboard cutouts of yourself.
Yes.
Now, what I'm referring to there is at some point, the Undertaker drops down to do a back body drop. Austin kicks him. As Undertaker comes up, he whacks Austin in the face with the back of his head. They've talked about it on the network discussion since. Austin was knocked out for a couple of seconds. I think it's been edited out, the amount of time he was actually out.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It's one of the reasons certain parts of the match actually are a little bit sloppy. But I'll come to that. The Undertaker versus Austin feud essentially embodied late 1998 when the WWF really started to dominate the Monday Night Wars. The feud would continue until December, when the Undertaker was buried alive after attempting to embalm Austin alive. The championship, however, eluded the Undertaker, who came out the loser on multiple occasions. Was this feud everything that it could have been?
Well, as you were saying earlier about how you would never really got Austin because you thought you were too young, and me, like, looking back on all of the Attitude Era stuff, I never got the full effect of Austin either. But it was because of how much I liked The Undertaker that I was just never fully on board with Austin. And The Undertaker's character at this point, he was like a very interesting tweener type character, because he's in a feud with like the hottest babyface of all time. So he's not going to be the babyface, but he was almost doing this weird like respect character where he was kind of just in the middle. And yeah, it was just a really interesting and odd like moment in his career where I sometimes felt that during this 1998 period they could not decide who they wanted the Undertaker to be, because they didn't want him to be full heel Undertaker because he'd gone through all this stuff with Kane. And then by this point already, like, he had been in the WWE for so long that he was already in like a near legend status despite being relatively young. And if you look at how far on his career has gone, it's like crazy to think that. But so they put him in this weird kind of not a good guy, not a bad guy, like position where, well, you see how the match goes on, like especially with the ending where he was like this almost respectful character. So I think that this feud maybe could have been a lot better if they had just let the Undertaker go full heel in it. But then again, the problem with that is like a full heel Undertaker has all these connotations of like satanic stuff, almost mystical stuff, all this stuff. Does that really work with someone whose character is like a blue collar working man? They're two very true, very different things to be mixing in one universe. So I think this period of The Undertaker was like a normalizing of The Undertaker. And in that way, even though he still had the masked brother and everything, but they kind of normalized him as a person enough to take on Austin. Yeah, and that is something they definitely had to do. They tried to lean towards what would later on become a big thing for The Undertaker, always talking about respect and value and the like. Because and I think in the commentary, like something that surprised me was JR does say something like that, like about The Undertaker being like a leader and stuff, and it's so early on for JR to be saying that's kind of more what we saw with like the later bits of the American Badass character, that it kind of as a fan watching it's very odd to think that the Undertaker, the way he was portrayed, would be any kind of locker room leader. Like surely his personality would be that of Edge, not talking to anyone, like loner type. Except Sable, yeah. The Undertaker was a strange one in every sense of the word. Even just the Raw immediately after this, he did turn a much more forceful heel. But at that point, they essentially weakened him to a point where even with Kane on his side, he still couldn't get the win. And it wasn't until he was buried alive and came back as the Ministry of Darkness Undertaker when they really embraced the heel. And knowing you, Ministry of Darkness Undertaker, must have been a real joyride for you. I loved Ministry of Darkness Undertaker. that was to the extreme that I wanted him to go. Yeah. And sadly, ultimately, I think even Mark Calloway thought this is too far. Thus, he returned as a biker. But me, as I keep saying, an extremely young girl at this time, was like, please be more satanic. Please, I love it. Please sacrifice more things, please.
Oh, I can just imagine you in your bedroom growing up. Sacrifice me, Undertaker, sacrifice me.
I have a really vivid memory of watching an episode of Raw during the ministry time. And it was, I can't remember who exactly it was, but in this scene, the acolytes or Midian were being inducted into the ministry, and they had to drink some blood. I think it was the Undertaker's blood. Do you remember?
Yeah, it will have been Midian. The acolytes were never formally inducted, they just were. But yeah, Midian was formally inducted using blood.
And I remember watching this, being way too young to watch this, and my granddad basically having to tell me like that wouldn't be real blood, like people wouldn't really do this. But I was very, very much ready to form my own Belfast chapter of the Ministry of Darkness had the Undertaker called on me to do so.
Given the intensity of their feud leading into WrestleMania 14, did it make any sense to you that Kane and The Undertaker would actually become a team?
Yes, because they are brothers, after all. And the whole introduction of Kane, if you remember, The Undertaker would never fight his brother. But then he was pushed to fighting his brother. But after fighting, they were to reconcile, especially when they both figured out that Paul Bearer was the real problem.
True, that is definitely a fair comment. And even though The Undertaker stuck with Paul Bearer for a long time, he obviously did eventually realise that he was someone who needed to be buried in concrete.
Do you remember the pay-per-view where Paul Bearer, The Undertaker, I think is it Unforgiven, where The Undertaker beats up Paul Bearer on the stage where Jeff Jarrett and Sawyer, I think it's Sawyer Brown played, like they played a song during the pay-per-view, and basically The Undertaker beats Paul Bearer up on the stage and he puts a drum over him, and JR's commentary is just Paul Bearer wearing a drum. It's just fantastic. It's just that simple. Paul Bearer wearing a drum. Look it up if you haven't seen it.
I will look it up because I haven't seen it, and now I'm very, very interested. Certainly know how to sell it. Would a Stone Cold Steve Austin type character still work now?
It did. Becky Lynch.
Can't argue with that. That's fair.
Yeah, a Stone Cold character would work, but I'm not sure it would work with a Vince McMahon character, because I think fans are like too smart for that now to do the Vince McMahon character. But yes, a Stone Cold kind of like do whatever the hell you want type character would work, and I think that that's what Becky Lynch was channeling, and it did work like that, fighting underdog, because really like Becky ended up becoming the man because people thought that out of all the women from that NXT era, she was one that was never given the fair shot, and she very much had like an organic rise in the same way as Austin.
Both men have been quite vocal about how banged up they got during this match. They went particularly in-depth during Austin's Broken Skull Sessions interview with The Undertaker. The chosen ending, designed to be conclusive for Austin but still protect The Undertaker, was a blatant low blow while The Undertaker walked the ropes, followed by a stunner and a pinfall.
Well, I'm just going to say that my note was old school ball shot stunner.
Which is accurate. That is exactly what happened.
That is accurate, yes.
Who came out looking the better from this match?
Austin came out looking the best, because The Undertaker couldn't get the job done, and on commentary so much they refer to like the size of The Undertaker and how much bigger he is and like the weight difference and everything, but at the end of the day he still couldn't get the job done against Austin's basic brawling techniques. Could not, or were able to put away The Undertaker. So yeah, I loved the bit at the end when JR shouted Austin wins, and you can just hear someone that must have been sitting behind the commentary table going whoa whoa, like an actual human siren. Those were the days when fans were really invested.
When fans are really invested, when fans really cared.
Yeah.
Undertaker seemed to agree with that because after the match, he takes the World Championship, the Smoke and Skull belt as it was, and offers it to Austin. Is this something you expected to see from the dead man?
Yeah, because with what I was saying before, like this was what his character had become. He was this in-betweener. It was like at this exact point, it was like he was walking like this tightrope of like not wanting to offend anyone, which is very strange. So yeah, I think the ending is very odd, him just handing Austin the belt, especially with everything that would come after, but it was the weird booking of The Undertaker in the summer of 98 that they decided to go for. And remember, like, we are so close to the King of the Ring.
Yeah.
Like, this man tried to kill another man months ago. We've already established he's an arsonist. He then tried to murder a person by throwing them off the top of the Hell in a Cell, which the fans seemed delighted about because Mankind had to go through more physical punishment before fans could actually accept him as a sympathetic person. Like, Mankind, despite that, still had a way to go. But despite all this, at this point, The Undertaker's just like, oh yeah, you were the better man. Congratulations, have a belt. Not gonna do anything, not gonna attack you or anything. Because that wouldn't be like me. I have enough criminal charges. Interesting booking. But still better than 2020 booking.
You are so right. That was like 3 months before he literally tried to kill someone.
Yeah.
Funny old world. This match would be the catalyst for an Undertaker and Kane reunion, the Deadly Games tournament, and the rise of both The Rock and Mankind. One final question before we sign off. Does SummerSlam 1998 stand the test of time?
100%. Watching this pay-per-view reminded me of why I still love wrestling in 2020. It was so, like, I know this pay-per-view so well. The amount of like random commentary lines and stuff that I remember, and yet I was still watching this excited for every match, even though I knew the outcome. Like, watching the Triple H Rock ladder match was more exciting than watching any current WWE match, sadly. Like, it 100% holds up, and there's so much they could learn from the booking there, because the roster, it wasn't bloated in the way it is now. Everyone had a distinct character. Even people like the oddities, each oddity even had distinct characteristics, you know, even if it was just Golga really loves Cartman. Cool, like that's something in 1998 that was pretty relatable. I had a toy Cartman as well, but nowadays you don't get that, and that's where you don't have that fan connection and that emotional investment that they were able to create back in 1998. And you know what, this card is not filled with great matches. It's not like 5-star classics. I think other than the ladder match, there's no other match of note as a really good match. There's just other stuff that's, you know, there's like Sable having her thing with Edge, there's Jeff Jarrett getting his head shaved, but there's not other great matches or anything like that. But just as a card, it was great. As a pay-per-view to watch, it just absolutely holds up, and you'll have such a good time watching it.
Yeah, I definitely highly recommend it, not just because it's the first one we've watched, but it really does survive. It's something I've been revisiting quite a lot since, because it holds that special place. When it comes to match quality, second for me would be Val Venus and D'Lo Brown, to be honest.
Yeah.
I felt the opener was a very high quality match. So it goes to show as well that you don't need to fill a card with 5-star classics in order to get the result you want. Really, it does come down to having these very clear characters and everyone knowing who they are and what they do. And that is something I do feel is missing in not just the WWE, but in quite a few promotions at the moment. The WWE particularly can learn a lesson from their own history, I feel. That's why I like certain wrestlers like Rhea Ripley, for example, who knows exactly who she is. That is everything we have to cover from SummerSlam 98. Unfortunately, it was only a 2 hour and 45 pay-per-view. I gladly could have watched 5 hours of this one, but unfortunately that is not the case. Steph, do you want to tell us where we can find you for anyone watching here?
You can find me on Twitter at Stephanie M. Chase, on Instagram at Stephanie M. Chase, and on YouTube at Stephanie Chase Wrestling.
I just want to say thank you to anyone watching, anyone who has persevered through what is going to be quite a long video, almost as long, in fact, as the pay-per-view that we have been reviewing. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you again.